Welcome to Life Force Canada. I am Karen Klassen. We are dropping the veils so that we can see all the truth of this reality and how we can empower ourselves to create an energetic shift so that we can all live in a parallel society where we are free to achieve our full potential and live according to natural law. Do no harm. Today, we're talking about the global campaign to expose our children to the transgenderism, which is attempting to normalize pedophilia. And then we're going to discuss solutions moving forward. This agenda is also upsetting many in the gay and lesbian community as well. I'm grateful to have Croy here from the Gays Against Groomers speaking later during this call. We also have Hilla here, who is our lead facilitator of our education forum. She peacefully infiltrated a public drag queen story time in Vancouver and was harassed by the police. She's going to share her story. Everyone knows that one of our forums, of course, is education. And since 2020, we at Life Force Canada have been promoting a higher idea. And that is for all those who are awake and aware, parents and teachers, to exit the public school system. Why are so many indoctrinated and wearing blinders to what is truly happening? A big reason is because of our education system. Just a bit of the background for those of you who are new to Life Force Canada or unfamiliar with the history of our education system. John Rockefeller created the General Education Board back in 1903. It was set in a place as a means to train obedient citizens. So think of it as a giant social engineering experiment and for future factory workers. He was the mastermind behind the compulsory schooling and is famous for stating, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers." The GBU would provide major funding for schools across the nation and was very influential in shaping the current school system that we see in many countries now. And we usually think of schools as environments to stimulate learning, but ironically, it manages to promote mindless conformity and conveniently ignores the fact that we are all unique individuals with incredible potential. The inner life of the school has become an anticipatory mirror, a perfect introduction to the industrial phase and now corporate society. The most criticized features, of course, of education today is the lack of individualization, as I mentioned, the rigid systems of seating, grouping, grading, and marking the authoritarian role of the teacher. So we are taught, right, at an early age to trust and listen to our teachers. A powerful mind control structure. Now, I have a quote here that I want to read. It's from a man, his name is Adolf Ferrier. And he stated that the child loves nature, so he was locked in four walls. He cannot sit without moving, so he was forced to remain motionless. He loves to work with his hands and was taught theories and ideas. He likes to talk. He was told to keep quiet. He wanted to know. He wanted to learn by heart. He would like to explore and seek knowledge, but he was given them in a ready-made form. And then the children learned what they would never have learned in any other condition. They learned to lie and pretend. So why did they take this free bird and stuff him in a cage? To pressure a child by force and make him stay in those four corners. And doing this, we take away his free development of his soul, heart, mind, and even physical development. The school system is a prison, a cage, and it teaches us to lock ourselves in a cage as adults. A child should grow up free, and I agree with him. So our children are in danger in this public school system, as now there is as you know, a most disturbing trend in the last few years, which is the destruction of the innocence of childhood through transgenderism. So why is this transgender initiative happening? It's about depopulation. If this transgender movement is successful, it is predicted that by 2040, there will be no naturally born children, and only men and women who are awake and courageous can stop it now. So we also know that in the public jurisdiction, that we are seen as a person, right? A dead entity. And if you identify yourself as a man or woman, you have this incredible power in this realm. And the dark magicians, they know this. This is why they are creating that gender confusion. As long as you remain a person or one of their many pronouns, they have control over you. They have zero control over a man or woman who knows thyself, right? A man or a woman who is sovereign. Now, this transgender movement is gaining momentum, and yet the majority of parents have no idea that this is even happening. I went out for lunch, this is like last year in the fall, with a few friends, and I hadn't seen them in quite some time. I think they thought that I was a conspiracy theorist as I was talking about what's happening in the education system and to our children. They are parents and they had no idea what I was talking about. So for those who are new to this subject, transgender is an umbrella term for people who gender differs from what they were assigned at birth. Pedophilia is a psychotic, narcissistic, I'm adding these words, disorder in which a soulless adult and I would say an inorganic adult experiences a primary or exclusive sexual attraction to prepubescent children. I'm trusting that this video is going to be shared. The replay is going to be shared because more parents need to know that this is happening. So the truth is that we are all born with feminine and masculine energy moving through us. Every man has both masculine and feminine energy. Every woman has both masculine and feminine energy exist within them. And again, the dark magicians of this realm, the controllers, right? They are using this against us. They are making young girls believe that if you feel this masculine energy, it means that you are meant to be a boy. And if you're a boy and you're feeling the feminine energy, it means that you're meant to be a girl. And this is so not true. Again, we're all born, every one of us, with masculine and feminine energy, right? Masculine energy is that aspect of ourselves that takes action and is a protector, right? Giving. Feminine energy is all about nurturing and care, compassion. And you can feel these energies every single moment, depending on what tasks are before you. These energies are not about gender, but they are attaching these powerful, invisible forces to a gender, which inverts the truth. When in fact, these masculine and feminine energies are all about cultivating electromagnetic energy to assist us in shifting us into higher states of consciousness. And of course, these controllers, they know that we are here, right? It's the Great Awakening, that we are moving and shifting into higher levels of consciousness, and they don't want that to happen. So I know there is a lot of information across Canada, but I wanted to share with you also that there's many elementary schools in the US and around the world, and they're now teaching children to use the word person, right? Person who produces sperm, person who produces eggs instead of male and female. So crazy. And a research paper, as I mentioned in the email that I sent out, the American Medical Association Pediatrics shows that there's about a 389% increase in young girls receiving mastectomies. And this was in 2016 and 2019. So it's been reasonably pointed out that the encouragement and facilitation of sex of underage minors, the sexualization of our children, and making pornographic books available to them is, of course, we know a form of grooming seen in cases of pedophilia. So this is an agenda being pushed on the children with the intent to destroy families, right? An agenda to depopulate. So it's long overdue for us Canadians, right, to put our foot down and really say no. Okay, that's it for my rant. Let's breathe in life force energy. Breathing in our divine masculine and feminine energy. It's really about the power that's really going to uplift us out of this inverted 3D reality that is before us. Okay, Hella. Hella is, again, our lead facilitator of our education forum. She's so incredible. Hella, we would love for you to share your story and then what solutions you have.
Thank you, Karen. First of all, I appreciate everybody that is here on the call on a long weekend. That means that you are aware that this is an urgent situation and something that we need to tackle together as a community. We had one education forum that was dedicated to SOGI and the origin of SOGI, the connection and the ties to the UN, of course, the WHO, of course, and all those globalists that are actually funding this curriculum. This curriculum has SOGI 1, 2, 3, sexual orientation and gender identity is a curriculum that has infiltrated the schools. I have a after-school learning pod, and only this year I've seen the LGBTQ flag in the whole of the school, and there's a few teachers assigned to be part of the SOGI curriculum instructors. I'm not very much involved with the school because my program is after school. I just pick up the children, but I decided to ask randomly a few parents if they know what SOGI is. Everyone I've asked has no idea what it is. I didn't want to talk to the children that are at my care because they're kindergarten to grade 3, and I certainly do not want to get into sex education issues with them. But their parents are clueless, and yet it's there and it's happening. So schools do not even communicate that to the parents. So that's, to me, is pretty alarming. Sexual education that is not being opened up to discussions first with the parents to see if parents agree to this type of indoctrination, not to mention some of the books that are in the schools' libraries that have pornographic illustrations, some foul language, some of them. And those are books that are like out there for children in elementary schools. Karen, I don't know even when to start. I must admit that about a year ago, I was not that informed myself. And then I started to see videos and some material on Telegram groups, and I'm thinking, oh, those crazy people in the United States, oh my goodness, what is happening there? I'm thinking, we're in Canada, it's still okay. Until I saw a post last November about a drag queen storytelling in a neighborhood house, which is like a community center in a city where I live, pretty close to my neighborhood. And I used to perform in that community center. And I thought, okay, let's look up at what is this drag queen storytelling here in Kitsilano neighborhood house, who's performing there, what are they about? And my business partner, Michael Fraser, and I looked into the social media platform of those two performers. One of them was named Satanics. And the social media platform was full of obscene, vulgar, just horrifying self-portrait of those performers. I mean, blood, sexualization, it just completely not child appropriate, to say the least. And so Michael and I were thinking, okay, Michael has a child actually that lives in this neighborhood. We're thinking we want to set up a meeting with the director and ask them some questions. Are those performers that supposed to read stories to children, do they go through some screening, some criminal record check? Why drag queens wants to tell stories to children? And he met with us and couldn't really answer our questions. I mean, to give it to him, he was sitting and listening, but when we asked some questions, why drag queen storytelling to children, uh, he kind of dismissed it with inclusivity and diversity. And we said, we're not against LGBTQ community and diversity and inclusivity, but why to children that are 3 to 10? How does that compute? I personally said to him, I'm a teacher and a mother, and just my gut feeling was like something's wrong in this picture, and he just couldn't explain it. So after a conversation with him, we went outside to get interview with one of our friends here that documents different protests in Vancouver. And as we were speaking, I noticed a small crowd was gathering around. They were wearing masks. They were waving the LGBTQ plus flags, and they were playing the ukulele, kind of nice, lovely songs. And when they noticed that we're actually speaking with some concern, they came very close and started to sing really, really loud to sort of sabotage the interview. And that to me was shocking. I just realized something's off here. It's not innocent as it may seem to be, like all about diversity and inclusivity, because we couldn't speak our part even outside of the community center. It seems like someone was sending them to block us from actually peacefully expressing our concern as parents, as educators, as people who feel that drag queens should be an adult in an adult setting and not tell stories to children.
This is great, Hella. What we'll do is I'll have Croy speak now, and then we'll move into a Q&A.
Thank you
so much for just being who you are and standing for truth. I know it's a very challenging conversation, and I was sharing with Laura Jane and Karen as I've been doing my research too, and every time I step into this conversation about what's happening to the children, I get so emotional, and I know you've been going through that as well. So yeah, I get it. Thank you.
I shall introduce myself. My name is Croy Jenkins. I am a part of Gays Against Groomers Canada. I joined earlier, actually in the fall. I reached out to Gays Against Groomers. There wasn't a Canadian chapter, so I helped raise the banner in Canada unofficially, and then they finally contacted me after I had participated in some protesting of the drag queen story hours. About myself, I consider myself a regular individual. Before all of this craziness happened, I was just an individual. I would never have come out and told people I was gay because it's the least interesting thing about me. I'm an actor, an opera singer, an artist, all of those things before anything sexual. Anything sexual that happens for anybody should be behind closed doors and between consenting adults. I don't know why we've lost the plot on that situation, but apparently we have. And now it's up to people from my community like myself to stand up and say no, because anybody else they're going to throw slurs at, homophobic, transphobic, racist, bigot, all these. Well, unfortunately, fortunately for people like myself, that doesn't work. So they can throw those things at me, but it won't work. Let me talk a little bit about what is the transgender movement and the layers of complexity that are within it, because it's more insidious than just predators. Yes, there are predators, there are pedophiles who want access to children, and that is a huge problem of it. So 3 tenets of our Gays Against Groomers are we are against the sexualization of children, we are against the chemical castration of children, and we are against the mutilation of children. So 3 prongs. There are predators who want after children, and they are hiding under the guise of the LGBT whatever plus flag to get access to children, because drag queens are the thing, the avenue to get there. Not all drag queens, but a lot of them are for this. The other part of this, which is far more insidious, and the reason why this is all being allowed, is it all comes down to follow the money. It's the money trail. It's the medical industry. So here's the line of why this is being allowed to happen. And it all ties into Bill 36. If you're familiar with Bill 36 in BC, it's not in other provinces, but we'll put a pin in that because it's very important for you to look out for what this is and how it will broach other provinces. So with the medical system, the reason that they're pushing transgenderism is because it's just pure profits. If you get children addicted to hormone treatments, they're on them for life. First of all, they're customers for life. Then surgeries, that's more business for them. And the most insidious part about it is we've opened up to the idea of MAID. So if anybody who doesn't know what MAID is, it stands for Medical Assistance in Dying. Take a moment for you to take that in. We have an assisted suicide program in Canada. Now, we don't have the statistics of how many trans people kill themselves in Canada, but in the US, by their statistics, it's 40%. And we're pushing it along pretty hard in here, not as hard as Tavistock in the UK, but pretty hard here. And the only reason we hear about it in the States is because there's political pushback. There's no political pushback in Canada. That's why we don't hear about it. So, and now with them pushing all this on kids and with a high ratio of suicide, and these are healthy kids who have these surgeries and these hormones, and these can't be undone. Everything is irreversible. They'll tell you they're reversible, but they are not. And once they go through this process, it's irreversible, and they're going to look to take their life. And the government will say, well, come on this way. We've got a program right for you. You can kill yourself in peace. And just so you know, on the dotted line, it says that you have to fork over your organs. So there it is. You get these kids hooked on something, and then when they want to die, the government gives it to them and they collect on their organs. There's been multiple media there's been multiple articles in the mainstream that has said that Canada now has a massive surplus of organs. So yes, there are predators and pedophiles in the system, but it's also a medical insidious plot against children. Let's see. Now, this ties into Bill 36. There's a lot of things that Bill 36, it's gargantuan to read, but how it pertains to this situation, I'll try and be succinct. Bill 36, 2 prongs that tie into this, that the government system mandates that all medical workers have to have a government approved opinion. Now, they're not allowed to give you their medical opinion. They have to have a government approved opinion. Now, this is where we're doing maybe a little bit of a stretch of logic, but I don't think it's that far of a stretch. If the government says we need to push transgenderism, the doctors and the nurses have to follow it, or else they will lose not only their license, they could be in prison and fined up to $500,000. So that's something that it will be a problem. Not only that is, this is side note, but anybody who's in the medical industry in BC right now is subject to take any concoction that the government says they want them to take, whatever pops out of their cauldron. So that's unfortunate as well. One of the books that I wanted to mention as well is a lot of Soji books that are out there, but one that's come to light recently is a book called This Book is Gay. And there is literally a page in this book that tells children, and children can be anything from 6 to 13, how to download a gay dating app to make gay hookups, start a profile, upload pictures, and connect with gay men. That is a book that's in our society for children right now. And part of the problem, well, a huge part of the problem, is that what Karen and Hila were talking about was that teachers are now keeping secrets from their keeping secrets with children from their parents. So they'll tell people about gay society and the gay agenda, and transgenderism and hormone therapies, but they will keep it a secret from their parents. So if your school flies the progressive pride flag, I would highly recommend you get them out of there as soon as possible. Some very disturbing things are happening. As Hila had mentioned, one of the drag queen story hours we had protested. Not long after that, there was a second one that we had gone to in Coquitlam. And after that one, there was about 500 counter protesters against us 10 protesters. And everybody showed up in lewd costume. There was one guy who had a sign that said "Dick and Balls." My apologies, but that's what it said. And afterwards, I had a conversation with somebody who considered themselves trans, as male to female. And I asked them, where do we draw the line? If one extreme is pedophilia, where do we draw the line and say we've gone too far? Is it reading books to children? Is it dancing in front of children? Is it when venues from libraries go to gay bars? Is it when dancing turns into taking off clothes? Like, where is the line? And of course, they cannot give you an answer, because if they give you an answer, it holds them culpable. They have to stand by their words. Now, the reason I bring that up is because how long does it take to go from drag queen story hour in a library to all ages drag show in a gay bar? 2 weeks. 2 weeks after that event, I infiltrated an all ages drag show at our downtown gay area, where there were children, and one was 7 years old, got up at the end of the show. And the drag queen said, "Oh, how old are you?" And the girl said, "I'm 7. To which the drag queen replied, "Wow, my drag kids keep getting younger and younger and younger." One of the other problems with this drag show is they had promoted a program called the Courage Campaign. And in this Courage Campaign, they are going across the nation to different schools promoting trans ideology, telling children that they can get surgeries, they can take hormones, they can be how to be a drag queen, as if it were like telling kids about clown college, but the new clown college is gay burlesque. And 2 weeks after that, a story which corroborated all of this came out in the Surrey Now, where a child came home and asked their father, "Why was there a man in drag in my school?" talking about hormones and surgeries. And this child, she was 8 years old. And we are at a dark point where we need to start scrutinizing our medical system and scrutinizing our education system. I'm sure you all are doing very much so by being here today, but this is where we are now. The battle is now in our school, and it is a silent and sneaky operation that is being portrayed by our opposition, who want to take our children from us.
Roy, thank you for joining us this evening. We are so grateful to have you here. We love your heart, and I'm so glad that Hila reached out to me as well. Actually, Hella, you can go first and I'll get my screen ready here.
Okay, so again, I want to thank Croy, and he is so courageous the way he stood there outside the library in Coquitlam in British Columbia and held the stand of what's right and what's wrong with respect to sexualizing children. We live in times of inversions, clearly. And what struck me at that event in the neighborhood close to where I live was that at some point I thought, okay, I will go inside and actually check the event, see what it is about. And as I was going up the stairs, I was stopped and I wasn't allowed to actually go inside. Although I said, I'm a teacher, I'm a mother, I'd like to see the performance to see if I can bring children if it's appropriate, because, you know, it's not that clear. And as I wasn't allowed, I was actually threatened that the security will come and kick me out. And eventually, talking to the director, he saw that it was me. He said, "Okay, let her stay." And I was watching the show, and it was quite disturbing. I mean, I'm thinking those are this is a guy, but it's not clear whether he's a man or a woman. And then at some point, one of the songs that they sang to the children was the song by Madonna, Vogue. And he prefaced it with, so I want you all to feel free to be who you are. Just like back in the 80s in New York clubs, we had this song that we were singing, people from all walks of life and gender identity, and it's all about being yourself. And I'm thinking, you talking to toddlers that are barely speaking, there's young children, and you talk to them about New York nightclub scene. That just was so inappropriate. And at some point, so what I noticed also, that most of the children there were children that were brought from the programs within that community center. So not many parents chose to bring their children to this drag queen story time. There were maybe a few. And as people took photos, I wanted to take a photo as well. And as soon as I touched my phone, the security person come to me and he says to me, "You cannot use your phone." And I looked at him and I said, "Excuse me, but who are you? I can do whatever I want. I'm sitting here peacefully watching the show." And it ended up to be such a shocking experience for me. Not only he wanted to throw me out, but he threatened to bring the police. And eventually he did, and create a bit of a scene. But obviously they had nothing against me. So I took my time and just made a point that a person peacefully sitting and witnessing and watching, you can't threaten me with the police. It's just wrong. So that was my personal experience with the inversion of, you know, a drag queen with unchecked background can sit down and tell stories to children and sing songs that are not appropriate, but an educator and a mother was attempted to be thrown away from the community center. Those are the crazy times we're living in.
That is just so sad. And I know that you have such a big heart too, Hella, and it was very devastating for you. And yes, we are in crazy times right now.
And you know, another shocking fact for me was the paid opposition and Antifa people that were in both events. Again, I see them on videos from the States and thinking it's out there, but they're here and they're active. And in Coquitlam, they were pretty aggressive, as Croy can definitely share. So we have to take a stand, and it's important that we get informed, that we share it with as many parents as possible. And we'll talk probably more about it. So thank you. With that, I'll yield for now.
Thank you, Hella. I just wanted to share again the Gays Against Groomers site. Now, Croy, I know this site is in the US. Is there an actual Canadian website as well, or is it just chapters?
They are chapters. So we do have a Canadian chapter. You can find it through gaysagainstgroomers.com. You go to chapters and there'll be the Canadian one there. We're still fairly small and we're slowly growing. We're getting there. But unfortunately, as I said, there's less political pushback in Canada.
Right.
So people are less forthcoming, let's say. They're more frightened to approach the situation than people maybe in the US are. So it's definitely a hurdle we're trying to overcome, but we will get there eventually.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the powerful statements on this website is, it is going to take those of us from within the community to finally put an end to this insanity. And that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm like, yes. Thank you so much, Croy. Yeah, it's okay. Here's chapters. Alberta, Canada, excellent. Perfect. Okay, before we get into Q&A, I just want to share another website here, and that is our educational website. This is a directory for parents who are exiting the public school system to really look at different resources that are available to them, because it will be a huge transition, but a very important one as well. Yes, there's Hilla. So we're just really grateful for everything Hilla's doing, within this movement and making a difference. It's really so key right now. And I do believe that because we're seeing so much happening in the United States right now in regards to this topic, that it's starting to come up a lot in Canada. And so we just have time to prepare. And this is why I wanted to have this call tonight. I also have here, this is our LifeForce Canada website, and we have children here. So when you click on children, you'll actually go to the site that I just shared. But I also have the SOGI Task Force website here as well. Now, I did have Actions for Canada because they're doing a lot of work in Canada as well right now. However, the notice of liability that they are promoting and sharing is great. However, it has a lot of legalese in it. So if you want to go to Actions for Canada, they have a notice of liability for parents who want to go after the school boards. I think that's a solution that many parents are stepping into, is showing up at the school boards. However, I know that the school board in Mission is no longer allowing anyone from Action for Canada to show up. So yeah, it's just so crazy. But again, this is another solution, which I don't see happening here in Canada, but I've seen it in the US, where they actually just fire the whole, the entire board of directors of the school board. So I do believe that we have that power as a town or a county or a city, that we have the power to actually fire these people because they are not protecting our children. Okay, we're going to move into a Q&A now. DK, I know you've been patient. Thank you very much for having your hand up. If anyone has any questions for Hilla, Croy, or you have an experience yourself, please raise your hand. Thank you, DK. Go ahead.
Oh, hello. I've thought about this issue for a while, as I think many people here have. Everything from the spiritual component as can a soul be, is it like the soul male or female, or like it goes all the way back to that, I think, because I like to think really think about this topic. And in the comments, I mentioned something about sex versus gender. Of course, they used to be 1-to-1, but now they want to, um, break the two apart. I believe one way we can maybe win this is just to say, hey, there's a biological reality known as sex. Usually, I think males, you have XX and XY, right? The chromosomal arrangements. Anyway, I just want to say apologize, not because of anything I did, but I just think it's unfortunate that this whole ideology, particularly of grooming or teaching children about this, has been conflated with the gays, the lesbians. They're conflating it, and they make it seem that everyone who is an adult who is gay and lesbian has to go with this. Is not good, and it's just very unfortunate.
So one of the methods and the reasons why they're doing this is, if anybody's familiar with Yuri Bezmenov, a former KGB agent who became Canadian, I think back in either the 70s or the 80s, he said 4 ways to destroy a civilization. One is to demoralize and bombard with confusion. And so we are starting to blur the lines of what is real and what isn't. And now we have people questioning basic reality. Never before has there been a civil rights movement which required you to deny basic reality. And so this confusion is being used to push an agenda. So we know that there are 2 genders. We know that there are 2 sexualities. It's all one and the same, but they're using the obfuscation of information to bolster their narrative. And this is the method in which they do it. If a bunch of people showed up and said, we're doing this thing and that's it, that's game over for you, well, you'd say, well, absolutely not, I'm going to fight back. Everything happens in small gradients, right? It's death by 1,000 cuts, right? The term of frogs boiling in a pot. Everything is slowly changed over time. So we've had the pride flag since whenever, but then they added the black line to it, and then they added the brown line to it, and then they added the chevron, and then they added the white portion, right? So there was like several iterations before it got to this point, and nobody noticed it because you do it ever so suddenly, ever so slightly. You move in very small steps, and people don't notice until it's too late. So this is one of the ways that they're using gender and sex and all of this stuff to confuse children. It's slow implementations that we're blind to because it's happening in schools and we can't see it.
Thank you, Croy. For those who are just learning about this topic on the replay, of course, not here. So there is, what is it? The 2S LGBTQIA+, which is two-spirit, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, pansexual, agender, and genderqueer. Yeah, they just keep adding on, and you're absolutely right, DK. They've lumped everyone in, and so I'm just really glad that Croy is here, and we've got, just so many beautiful hearts that are just going to be pushing back on this agenda. Before we get into questions again, I want to talk about solutions this evening. And Laura Jane has, she heard about an amazing solution, so I just wanted her to share this.
Thank you, Karen. It was actually from the Freedom Rising call. And one lady, what they are doing, they have organized groups of volunteers that wherever the drag story is taking place, the drag story time, they actually are setting up outside the exact same venue, and they are doing superhero princess time. And so they bring in costumes for the children to put on. They have the parents reading appropriate material to the children. They were just implementing it this weekend, so I'm not sure how it's gone. But what they are doing is they are very peacefully saying the children deserve the opportunity, and the parents, to have our children be children, to have our sons and daughters hear age appropriate material. And they are not protesting anything. They had bubbles, they had balloons, they had costumes. So they have it all set up, and they were actually going from one part to another. And I believe it was Ontario, but it may have been BC, but I think it was Ontario that they were implementing that. And there were a whole lot of groups that said, that sounds great. Let us know how it's going, and we'll try and organize it so that if there is a superhero princess story time outside a drag queen story time, and you've got all these costumes, I wonder where the children would rather be. Like chances are pretty good that they'd rather have the bubbles and the costumes where they can be much more age appropriate. So I just wanted to share that. So kudos to that plan. I think that is a remarkable in terms of, it's not a protest, it's a normalization in the middle of all this inversion, is what I saw it as. And how are the cops going to arrest the parents for reading stories to their children in a public space?
Exactly.
It would be pretty difficult.
Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that, Laura Jane. I love that
I
idea.
agree. Yeah. Thank you.
Linda, go ahead.
Laura Jane, I just think that that's a great idea about the peaceful gathering, not a protest. And I hope that the drag queens can stay away from it and give them the space. That's been part of the problem, is that there has been so much violence, and the violence is coming from men that are dressed up as women, and they're acting. I used to own a pub, and I had less incidences that were as violent as what I'm seeing happening at these schools and such. And it's looking almost more like a prison brawl at some of these schools, to me. And so I think that and the other problem is that the police are sticking up for the people that are the drag queens, and not so much for the people that are saying, hey, these are our kids, and what you're doing and how you're grooming them is wrong, and holding up a sign stating such. So I think the police also have to be notified about these gatherings that they're having, to have the protection that they deserve. Because if they're there with their children, you never know. It's just getting to the point that unfortunately we can't just relax in a park anymore and read to our children unless we're part of the narrative. So I just wanted to say that, because the violence is really getting to me. And we need to have the protection, and we too deserve the protection with our beliefs of protecting our children from this, and it's not happening. So
Thank you, Linda. Croy, do you think that the same thing is happening in regards to what you were sharing, that the teachers have to go along with it or they'll lose their job, and the same thing would be applying to the police as well, that they have to go along with this agenda or otherwise they lose their job?
For the teachers, more so the teachers than the police. And there is a very specific reason of why that happens. More people within the education system are woke progressive types who are more acclimated to this, they're more willing to do it. The police, when it does come down to a situation of violence, I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent for this to make sense, unfortunately. If we recall 2020, the Summer of Love, the George Floyd riots, looking at Antifa, who burned down cities, a lot of the reason why these people weren't arrested is because it's easier for the police to arrest the smaller group than it is the large group. So for example, if it got to the point where at the protest I was at, where it was 10 of us versus 500 counter protesters, all dressed up in whatever drag costumes they had, if it came down to the police arresting people for whatever, it would have been us 10, because it's easier to arrest 10 people and appease a mob of 500 than the other way around. And they'll do whatever they need to do to keep the peace, regardless of who's right and who's wrong. one of our reporters, who's a good friend of mine named Drea Humphreys of Rebel News, she got physically assaulted in this protest, and she went up to the police on camera and said, "Are you going to record that? Are you going to report that? Oh, well, somebody will come and take your report. It's about you." Well, sorry, I have to go. Bye. So the police are complicit, but for a very different reason.
Right. So we just have to increase our numbers on our side.
Unfortunately, that has always been a problem since day one, since our protests began. Just general Canadian protests began in 2020s. Sometimes it's always been difficult to find numbers.
Right. I get it. Thank you for that. Steve, go ahead.
Okay, I was at a meeting a few months ago, and it was put on by the Ontario Landowners Association, and we were talking about Crown land patent deeds, and so that's what I was expecting to listen to. And we had one speaker, but then the second speaker, she was a retired principal, 10 years. Prior to that, 20 years as a teacher. And she was basically doing exactly what we're doing now, educating the public on what's really going on. She said a lot of things, and I looked for my notes. I wish I could have found them, but I can't find them. But she talked about the history of this movement. It goes way back. Like, I think it even goes back to the 50s. Like, if you trace it all the way back, it goes way back. So it's something that's been in the works for many, many years, and is multi-leveled, faceted, and very disturbing. I also know somebody, single parent, she's divorced, and she's gone through this with her daughter. And it's a bit of she knows how I feel about it. And I haven't brought it up recently, but what I think happens is the parent initially doesn't want to go along with this. They want their daughter to stay their daughter. But I think through repetitive influence, the child is being influenced through social media, and the parent then is being influenced by the authorities who she seeks help from. So she goes to see whoever, and the doctor will say, well, studies show that if we don't do anything about it, the child will commit suicide. So they're using fear big time. I presented this to the speaker, the retired principal, and she said it's the opposite. They're going to commit suicide when they realize what they've done to themselves. And they realize that there are limited true identities. And what they're investing is a false identity. It doesn't exist. Like, this is from the law of one. You have, in my opinion, you have straight male, female, you have gay male, female, and within the gay, you have the masculine and the feminine of each. So there's those basic identities, but all else is really a false identity. So they're investing in something that doesn't even exist. And so when, some may never realize it, but when they do realize it, I think all hell's going to break loose for them consciously. Then they're going to be at risk of suicide.
So true, Steve. It's like Corey said, what is it? The suicide rate in the US is 40%?
After they transition?
After they
Yes.
The parents are being told if they don't transition, they're going to commit suicide. And
Yeah.
this is how they get the parents on board, through fear. This is what I've learned from sitting talking to this woman. I don't know if this is what other parents go through, but I can see it. because fear is a giant motivator. And then, like, I'm in the healthcare field. It's hard enough to stay healthy as it is without going through all this hormone therapy at such a young age. You know, this this parent is now taking their daughter for blood work on a regular basis to check bone density. The child's 17 years old. The child's just had a double mastectomy. And it just drives me absolutely crazy. And the child also has a bit of a learning disability, you know, which breaks your heart right there, right? Because you can see how this child could have been swayed easier, perhaps, than your average child. And the parent is, like, another thing we have differences in is vaccinations, especially the COVID, but she's got all her shots, you know, and I had to basically stop her after her second COVID shot and tell her to give her head a shake. But again, she's invested in allopathic medicine, which is not all bad, but the doctor is God. You know, everything they say has to be correct, right? And so now she's in a position where it's been done, you know, and now she's got a hope that everything works out okay, but it likely won't. So anyway, it's very, very disturbing.
It is, Steve. We hear you, we feel you 100%. Thank you so much for sharing. Go ahead.
That I really appreciate Croy being here right now, because I've heard about Gays Against Grooming, and I thought, oh, that's right on, because that retired principal, she also mentioned how certain groups have been hijacked by this demonic, psychopathic group, and LBGT is one of them that has been hijacked. So anyway, I'm really glad that Croy is here, so I'll yield at that.
Thank you, Steve. So are we. Go ahead, Cry.
As the gay movement right now, we've separated. We now consider ourselves the LGB and sometimes T, and that's it. We're the LGBs. We're done with the alphabet mafia. Because let me be honest about something. I'm going to put something in perspective, and it's going to make a little bit more sense, and it's jarring. So it used to be about tolerance, but when the gay people were tolerated, and then they were eventually accepted, but tolerance leads to acceptance, but acceptance leads to requirement. And now we're at a situation where the turning point of where now transitioning, or the trans movement, is at the point of a requirement. It's become do it or else. That sounds a lot like gay supremacy to me. So that's what I'm calling it. This is all gay supremacy. They fly those banners like they're Nazi symbols. Funny enough, you've probably all seen it. You put 4 of the progressive pride flags together, it makes a swastika. So just throwing that out there.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you. Rita, go ahead.
I was just going to mention that in our city, there's a group of us going to be getting together to talk to our mayor, to enlighten him on some of the different topics that we are concerned with. And one of the topics is the SOGI 123. He is probably out of his jurisdiction for the schools, but when it goes to activities and events at the library, which is city run, then it is within his jurisdiction. So I am doing the research on SOGI 123 because I have grandchildren coming up, and I want to know what they're going to be faced when they do go to elementary school. And The best thing to do is to try to get on a school board. I am on the Montessori school board. So that's my part in it. But again, one of the best things to do is to get right in to where the school boards are talking. If you can get in on one of their meetings, and just as a curious onlooker or a grandparent, if they'll let you in there on the boards, just to see what is happening. But Karen, I just wanted to know, I just glanced up and the Expose SOGI 123, I didn't quite get all that was on the screen that you sent.
Oh, it is actually, if you go into the lifeforcecanada.ca website.
Yeah.
And under children, you'll see that there, the SOGI task force.
Oh, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And for those of you who do not know, Rita is in Lethbridge. So they are taking action in Lethbridge. I love it. Thank you, Rita.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I just wanted to speak into what Steve was talking about in regards to how parents are being threatened that their children are going to commit suicide. I'm not too sure where this is from, but I saw it on Instagram. And it was an art teacher asked a student to stay after school to attend an art club. And the parents gave consent for their daughter because they thought she was going to be attending an art club. But when the daughter got there, she discovered it was actually a gender and sexuality awareness club. The art teacher had lied and brought an outside presenter to the classroom. And this presenter was sharing that telling the kids that if they're not comfortable in their body, that they are transgender, and that queer is a term to use while you are still figuring out your sexuality. She told them that these new labels that they have just adopted might make them want to commit suicide. She talked about puberty blockers, etc. And she told them that their parents are dumb, that their parents don't know anything, their parents are not safe, and that they do not have to tell their parents where they are for any of these meetings. So, oh my gosh, this is happening everywhere. And so the more that we share this information and allow parents who are still got the blinders on to make sure that they are very aware of what's happening. Brian, go ahead.
I remember I seen Croy, we were in the education room one time and I met Croy in there, and it was good to see him in there. And I think what he's doing is great. The Gays Against Groomers, I think that's powerful. And they've got a lot of muscle behind what they do. There are many, many businesses supporting this stuff. Like we're talking big, big, big businesses. Shell Oil. Yes. Alberta Steel. They've got their sidewalk painted with the LGBTQ colors. The stripes are right there on the sidewalk, painted. So everybody who goes in there has to go through a gate with their pass card, because if you work there, you have to have a pass card and you have to walk on this sidewalk. And it's the same like at Shell, and there's other big businesses doing this too. This is highly, highly organized. Like I said, big, big, big businesses involved with this. One of the key things here that I think should be of the greatest concern is this is meaning transgender. Say if I'm transgender, I can go into a female dressing room and say that I'm a transgender when there could be young children undressing, going swimming, whatever environment this is. This is of great, great concern. And like I've said before, this transgender movement and using the gender of your choice washrooms, it's like a gateway for pedophilia, so that old men can go in and look at young girls into their dressing rooms. This is, and I don't think people really give that full consideration. This is major. I don't really have anything against the gays or the lesbians or the bisexuals. They are not causing these problems. I think it's the transgenders. With that, I just wanted to get that off my chest. This is a serious matter. One other thing that I did want to say is, do you think it's even a good concept to not give this subject a lot of attention? Or are they just going to steamroll it anyway? Because if we keep fighting it, we're just raising more and more attention to this. And sometimes that's even worse than just ignoring it. I'm not sure. I yield.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate your comments. I know that we are here to not be against anything. We're not here to fight anything. We're here to, of course, share knowledge and then focus on solutions, right? How can we move through this time? Because we do see it. We do see their agenda. It is about the depopulation piece. I forget his name, but he is a man, was it Dr. Myron Golden? He was sharing that if we do not open our mouths, they're coming for our children. They're already coming for them in cartoons and right, Disney, etc. And he's like, why? Because they can't have children. And then he goes into depopulation. So yeah, 2 men cannot have children, 2 women cannot have children. So they're coming after yours. They have to recruit yours, and either in order to recruit yours, they have to silence your voice. They have to make your voice irrelevant to your own family members. And when they make all your descendants homosexual, they cut off your family tree at the root. So they're pushing that anti-life agenda. And also too, if you look at in the US right now, they are also, a federal judge just ordered a Pennsylvania school district to allow after school Satan clubs, Ohio, Carolina, and now Pennsylvania, these satanic clubs for schools, for elementary schools and high schools. And it's the temple of Satan that are funding this. And it's of course connected to the WHO and everything, right? But they received religious status in 2019. And now they're moving it into the schools. And so we need to have the knowledge, because again, that's how this whole control structure, the mind control structure, has been created, because we did not want to see anything. We wanted to be blinded and just focus on the 9-to-5 job, right? Get married, have kids, and not see the agenda, the occult, the hidden information. So we need to bring it to light. It doesn't feel good. It's going to make us maybe throw up. It's going to make us become angry. But because it's bringing up an emotional charge, that is going to ignite us to go, okay, what can we do about all of this? Because if we don't have the knowledge, we're not able to really take any inspired action and create a beautiful future. So it's going to be really, really important. Sabella, go ahead.
I have several things that I wanted to say. My concern as a mental health and psychologist, counselor, is that teens are particularly vulnerable, part of the population, because who of all of us felt comfortable with our body when we were teens? Who didn't feel uncomfortable with our bodies when we were teens? I don't know anybody. We all felt uncomfortable at times because we compared ourselves to, prettier or smaller or larger or thinner or whoever, right, was on the film screens or in the magazines. So that's one thing. The other thing is that anybody who is has, how can I say, a depression, which is common. I mean, this is a very difficult age, adolescence is a really difficult age for most people, especially in our kind of society, because in our kind, it's very much longer than in many other societies, right? I mean, in many other societies, children, grow up very fast because they're forced. But here we have this long adolescent period. And if you are, like autistic, disabled, you name it, anything that's uncomfortable or difficult, and then you are actually invited to consider that as a gender issue instead of whatever else it can be, like a mental health issue or whatever, then it's really, that's, I'm happy that my son is grown up, and I'm extremely concerned about the way this is going, because that's a really vulnerable part of the population. The other thing that, yeah, and of course, what teens most want, what we most wanted at that age, and even later, but especially at that age, is to belong, to be part of something. So if the trend is in order to be part of, you need to be trans or consider that as a possibility, well, then you're going to be considering that as a possibility. So that's, to me, it's scary that they are really, doing that to very young children and to teens. Because, very young children, obviously, the thing about human beings is that we are naturally, and I mean that by nature, possibly bisexual by nature, and homosexuality has existed, like in all millennia, and actually not just for human beings, it also exists among mammals, some mammals, animals, right? But this trans thing, I've never seen this. It hasn't existed historically, because one thing is to dress up as a woman, like, and that's, to me, you see, I'm not sure that now it's being confused. But to dress a man who dresses up as a woman doesn't necessarily always want to be a woman. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, I have met drag queens who didn't really want to change their sex. They just enjoyed dressing up as women. How can I say? The other thing that I'm wondering is why there are so many. In fact, what percentage of the population is trans? I don't think it's a large percentage. How come there are so many showing up? I'm really kind of curious about this. I'm mystified by it. Anyways. And I think the important thing is to educate, help parents to talk to their children, to have closer relationships with their children that allow them to broach this subject, honestly. Now, the fact is they're being disqualified by the teachers and everybody else. So it's getting to be more and more complicated because, during adolescence, of course, your peer group is more important than your parents. And that's natural because you need to, you need to grow up, you need to find your own way. And so that's part of the challenge of why they're so easily embarking adolescents. Anyways, all I'm saying is we really need to do something to educate parents about this and children, but especially parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabala. You touched on different topics that, yes, we so agree with you. I used to go to drag queen shows with my girlfriends years ago. We used to love it. It was amazing, so much fun. It's adult entertainment, and that's where it was always meant to be. So yeah, Corey, I'm gonna have you speak next because I think you have a few brilliant words to share with all of us.
So yes, just been taking notes, and a couple of points I would like to address just from the last few speakers. So working my way backwards. So there is a statistic in British Columbia that was taken last year that says that 1% of high school students identify as trans. Now, the year prior to that, it was 0.25%. So we had a 0.75% jump, which is unbelievably massive. And then before that, much smaller. So it's becoming more mainstream. It's becoming a fad. And this is going to tie into one of the earlier things that I think Rita might have touched on in relation to high schools, and something that parents are absolutely going to have to be careful of, because hormone therapies will now be treated as like the new pot, the new marijuana, in that back in my day, there's some kids around back like, hey man, would you like a joint? But now it's like, hey man, would you like some hormone pills? Hormone treatments at high school will now be traded around like the new marijuana, and they're going to hide it from their parents. It's going to be the cool thing to do because all the kids are doing it, and they don't know what they're doing. They don't know that it's irreversible, and they're not going to listen to their parents because listening to your parents is uncool. And yeah, that's the direction we're absolutely headed. And there's just going to be a black market for hormone pills amidst students in high schools.
I never even thought about that, but yes, I can definitely see that happening 100%. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Go ahead, DK.
One question I had was, and this is for anyone who's here, like the people who are pushing this, everything from the drag queens to the teachers to the parents who might know about it, because I can't believe I live in a society that's allowing this. Like, do they actually know the full implications of what they're doing, or are they just like, oh, more tolerance? Like, I just find it hard to believe that they actually know the full extent of what they're doing. Yes, Karen, there are some the magicians at the top that you talk about, but I just find it hard to believe that all like the politicians and the teachers, they all. Anyway, what do you think, Corey?
We have two groups of people that this fall under. We have the people who know exactly what they're doing and benefit from it. And it usually ends in some profitable margin, such as all of the medical implications that come along with transgenderism. And then you have the unfortunate, the term is useful idiots, who will do anything because they think it is good, therefore they'll do it. So they'll show up to a drag queen story hour, or they'll take their children to a drag queen story, or they'll take their children to an all ages drag show because they think they're being progressive. They think that they're going to be a good parent by allowing their children to take hormone therapies. But they haven't done any research into it. All we need to do is look at, this previous generation where it was no longer parents raising their children, but parents would put their children in front of TVs or had them iPads, and YouTube would play, and it would go into all sorts of weird things. You would have like Hitler and the Hulk and Spider-Man singing songs to each other. We get this weird algorithm. Parents don't really know what's going on anymore, and that's where they'll become useful idiots for the people who know. They're like, oh, well, my child wants this and I want my child to be happy. We now live in a society where parents think that it's better to be a friend to your child rather than be a parent to your child. A child can get friends anywhere, but can only get two parents.
So true, Croy. I heard that parents are actually being arrested in the United States if they don't go along with what their child wants to do.
As I said, think of it this way. Whatever you hear that is happening in the States, it's 2 to 4 times as bad in Canada because there's no political opposition to push back on it. If you hear one story about somebody being arrested in the States, there's either twice or 4 times as many people getting arrested in Canada.
This is why we are talking about this tonight. Thank you, Croy. Oh my gosh. We need to breathe right now. I'm breathing some life force energy, everyone. Steve, go ahead. Thank you.
Is it Brian? You mentioned, should we continue to talk about this subject? Well, the way I look at that is we have to talk about it because the educated ones, we can see through it, but most people can't see through it. Their consciousness doesn't have the background to be able to identify the deception in the moment, right? But we have to help them. We have to seed their consciousness because the opposition is really good at seeding the consciousness. They know the collective consciousness, if they can control it, it will create the reality. It affects and manifests in the 3D reality. If enough of the consciousness believes in a certain thing, it will happen. So we have to use that against them. We have to talk about this with people who are on the fence and get them to see the deception And so we have to influence the consciousness in the way we can do it, you know?
Thank you, Steve. And you're right in regards to what Brian was asking is, yes, we definitely need to be having this conversation and educating as many people as we can. I'm going to be asking all of you that when I share this replay on our newsletter next week, if you can all send it out to your friends, I think it'd be really, really important. Hella, go ahead.
One thing that comes to my mind is this is part of an overall enslavement. Because when I see parents these days, it's really unfortunate. They hardly have quality time with their children. Two parents have to work full time, and in such an unconscious way, we in some way gave our children to the education system. So not that I want to blame ourselves, but it's just another thing to look deeper into our own lives. How do we live our life? How much of really close relationship we have with the people that we love so much and are important to us? And in this materialistic society, we've sort of came to a point where we almost have no choice. And I see how parents drop off kids in the morning, and then they pick up the kids in the evening, dinner, go to bed, press repeat. And they don't even have the time to talk to the children or look into what's happening in the schools. So this is something that is important to address and seek to. I feel the majority of parents, had they known about what's happening, they would probably take more action, but they're literally asleep in the enslavement program. Another point that I'm noticing is, for example, the school where I pick up my learning pod, there are many immigrants. They hardly speak English. So even when they see the flag or they don't have a clue of what's going on. So I wonder if there's a way to have material in under languages. And I haven't checked I was part of the SOGI 123 task force, but at some point I had to leave. And I don't know if they have some material there that is in some other language. Just trying to come up with solutions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Hilla. Yes, it's the programming. We've all been indoctrinated, right? We're all waking, well, not all of us, but I mean, all of us here. We're all waking up to the veils are lifting. And as the veils lift, and the more we begin to have the courage to speak out, that is so key, Hilla. And so I'm so glad that you are doing this, and Croy and everyone here. We do need to be speaking out about this and sharing what we're learning. It's so important. Thank you. And I do recommend that everyone here goes to our Lifeforce Canada education.ca directory. And if you know of teachers who are exiting the public school system and they have programs available, to post them in that directory. And this, of course, Hilla is there too, and she's got her Learning Pods course that she's offering for parents and for teachers, etc. too. So we do need to have the material there, the educational piece of how parents can learn more. How can we get this information out more? So that's going to be a big conversation going forward too. Laura Jane, go ahead. Thank you, Hilla.
Thank you. Actually, Hilla, I worked with immigration in Ontario and in BC. And many of these immigrants, number one, do not speak out against the government because of fear of not getting their PR. And they really want their children to get integrated into the Canadian school, which is very unfortunate at this time. So having it translated and having it put in very simple terms is really critical when you're working with the immigrant, and you have to look at it a little bit different, a little more simply, but also bring home the main point. And they need to have alternatives. They need to know that they aren't going to get kicked out of the country or deported or that sort of thing, because there's an enormous amount of fear, which is why we've opened the floodgates to every immigrant going, because Trudeau knows that that's how he's going to keep power and keep control. And that sounds probably racist, everything else, but I've worked in that system, and I know that's exactly what has been happening in many, many ways, and where they're drawing the population from. So that part of it. But that wasn't why I actually had my hand up. I just happened to hear that point. I did want to say one thing that did strike me as a very powerful video that I watched. A young father brought his son into the school board meeting, an open meeting. He had his son check out books from the school library. He had them read those books to those attending, and they were graphic. They were ones that not only not age appropriate, I wouldn't want to read them, so that's what he did. And it was amazing how many of those sitting in this meeting had no clue that this level of inappropriate material was there for every child to pick up and to read at will. And not only that, it was promoted. So I heard on the video a couple of people talking who got caught and going, oh my God, this exists? I can't believe it. Because this kid was reading out words that we would have had our mouths washed out with soap when I was a kid, but now these are acceptable, these are used, and these are promoted. So, it sounds like a small step, but just think of the power that was in that one child, making it verbal and really bringing it home to those adults that were going along with this particular agenda. And they actually had to sit there and listen to a 10-year-old talking about sucking a cock, pardon me, but that was the words in the book, and talking about that sort of stuff. And that is what finally woke some of them up. It takes that level, to go forward. So I just want to say there are solutions, but it's getting past the sleeping crowd. It's getting it out a little bit at a time, so we aren't going to give up on our children. That I do know. We're not going to give up on our sons, our daughters, our granddaughters, our nieces, our great nieces. And that is something that I'm very grateful for all of you to be here, because we know that we've just increased the cadre of those who are going to wake others up by just being here. And for our presenters, thank you, thank you, thank you. Right. So with that, I will yield and thank you.
Croy, I would love for you to share last words. We're so appreciative of you and all you do.
Thank you so much. I do want to say one thing that's positive, because I know a lot of this has been very dark and very heavy, but take heart in knowing that change is coming. It seems dark now, but things will get better because we are people who are paying attention. And so we'll get information much faster than those who aren't. The delay is about 1.5 years for those who are not paying attention to receive the same information. So we are about 1 year in from when this transgender movement going after the children has started. So we're only several months off from a shift, and we're starting to see a cultural shift. People are starting to wake up to it. They're starting to push back. They're starting to say no. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and sunlight is the best disinfectant. We will get there. Do not give up.
Yay, Corey. Thank you so much. Yes, we are all rising up and creating heaven on earth. And everyone just boycott that Ford truck, you know, the rainbow Ford truck that they have now. Yes, I love all of you. Thank you so much for everyone for being here. You are all light warriors. Together we rise.